Agra for me is more a film about sexuality and sexual repression and the idea of physical spaces and how our sexual lives affect the physical spaces that we live in and how the spaces in turn affect our sexuality. And also at the core, I think at a very, very human level, it is also a film about desire. The home is part of our most intimate lives, and it reveals things about a character which in many other ways it's difficult to explore. In a house where other people around him are far more crazier than he is, right? And far more devious than he is. And he's probably the only character in this house who's actually trying to fight the madness and trying to talk about it.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. We are privileged to have filmmaker Kanu Behl with us today, and we are going to talk about his new film Agra, which premiered at Cannes Film Festival in 2023, and it's going to release in Indian theaters in November. And Kanu, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making the time to join us.
Thank you for having me.
Right, at the outset, let's talk about Agra, and we'll be talking about your previous two films as well, Dispatch and before that Titli. But Agra, do you see it in conversation with your debut film, which also had its screening at the Cannes and has been critically acclaimed?
Perhaps in some ways, maybe. Honestly, I wouldn't know. That's, I think, for other people to decide. People who are watching my so-called body of work, even though ज़्यादा नहीं है, 3 ही फिल्में हैं. There are only 3 films, but for me, Titli was more a film about family and circularity and violence and how images transfer within families from one person to another, from one generation to the other, and so that was my piece about that.
Right.
Agra for me is more a film about sexuality and sexual repression and the idea of physical spaces and how our sexual lives affect the physical spaces that we live in and how the spaces in turn affect our sexuality.
And also these two ideas also, which are different in both the films. And I think if Titli was all about escape, this is more about entrapment in a way, So tell us a little bit about your exploration of, the home as a site of many things that could be contested site in a way.
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel like home is one of the primary battlefields to explore anyway with any sort of story, because the home is part of our most intimate lives, and it reveals things about a character which in many other ways it's difficult to explore. Not to say that there aren't films that are not shot completely outside the home, but I think it's an interesting battleground to watch your characters in. So again, I think the territory of home is coincidental more to all the 3 films to be able to have that fertile territory to see your character interact with their closest people and how they behave with these people for us to be able to peel off their layers one by one.
Exactly, and you do that very beautifully in Agra. Let me ask you about this, the title of the film itself, and also how integral do you think the city of Agra is to the story, or at least when you started writing the story? Because Agra, as you all know, is the city of Taj Mahal, which is a monument of love, but it's also known as, the city of mental asylum. So this duality of, madness and love, did you want to explore that as well in the film?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, I don't want to talk about a key aspect of the film, not to reveal too much about the film, but but the protagonist, whose name is Guru in the film, the protagonist himself was dealing with so many stresses and pressures within the film, and he's trying to find an expression for his repression in very strange ways, to the extent that he can almost be interpreted as possessed with some sort of madness himself. And so when I started truly when I found Guru and I started exploring his character, and this sort of obsessive aspect started to emerge,
Right.
I almost felt like, you know, here was a guy who, I mean, a character like Guru can be very easily boxed as,
Yeah.
oh, ye to pagal hai, he's mad,
right.
and you know, he's sick. But for me, the interesting thing was that here was a guy who can be easily labeled that, actually in a house where other people around him are far more crazier than he is, right? And far more devious than he is.
Yeah.
And he's probably the only character in this house who's actually trying to fight the madness and trying to talk about it.
Right.
I mean, you have a father who lives with two women in the same house, and here's this boy saying, I want to live with my girlfriend like you live here. In essence, he doesn't have the language, he doesn't have the vocabulary, but he's really trying to say, what are you doing? What's going on?
Yeah.
So I more and more, as I wrote the characters, I discovered that these guys are far crazier and madder than he is. And as the draft evolved, I almost started getting a feeling like this house was a madhouse, you know.
Right.
And that's where the idea of Agra, and because, you know, when we grow up in our part of the world, in Delhi and the north especially, there's a very popular sort of muhavra, which is, you know, Agra ka pagal khana. Everybody talks about the Agra ka pagal khana. So that actually just became like a metaphor for the madness of the film.
There are scenes which might be misread as perhaps, I don't want to use the term, but perhaps some critics would like to say that, you know, it's perhaps misogynistic, or it just portrays women in a very this thing. But personally speaking, I did not feel that way. But I wanted to ask you, is that something that, you know, that has been your concern, or that, you know, that people might misread the film or see the film in that light?
Not at all. See, I think one is so, I mean, personally, I'm so confident about the piece of work because you know that you've written each character with a lot of love and a lot of empathy.
Right.
And more than even that, I mean, I don't even want to wear that as a badge. I think more than that, you've tried to write every character in its full grown 3D-ness. So I know that, you know, I've spent a fair amount of time with each of the living beings in the film to know that. But yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of a trend that you see in Indian cinema now anyway, which is slightly worrying for me personally, which is that people are confusing the character with the filmmaker.
Yeah.
So, or more than even the filmmaker, with what the film is trying to say. I have a very strong belief as to why this film needed to be done from the inside, because I wrestled with it for quite a while before I wrote with the film, and I decided that because I myself I'm perhaps not as repressed as Guru was, you know. So just to I'll take a minute more, but just when I was starting to write, this was one of the central questions that I was asking myself, that do I even know him as well as I think I do? Because, you know, I've seen other guys, but there are other guys who are around me. Maine mohalle mein, I've seen I saw other boys who were far more repressed than I was. So I had to actually find ways to come close to feeling first what he's feeling. And once you arrive at that truth, then there is no other possible way to do the film. You have to do it from there because you know that this is what this guy is feeling.
I also wanted to bring in realism here because, you know, when we talk about cinema and cinema of this kind, there's always this discussion about, you know, how a film portrays the realities of different ways of living in India. And do you see, you know, as a filmmaker, do you see that element of realism in your cinema across these three films?
Yes and no. I mean, I always go back to one of my favorite filmmakers is Werner Herzog, and he used to say that the best documentary always tends towards fiction, and the best fiction always tends towards documentary. So I think anyway, the question of realism is a very sort of strange question because the moment you're doing a fiction film and the moment you choose to place the camera in a particular spot to take a particular shot. Realism though is already gone. You've made a choice. So yes,
that's true.
I think one just tries to build a ruse of reality to heighten the believability of what you're doing.
You of course, I mean, assisted Dibakar Banerjee, and a lot of, the ways that you bring in sexuality and show sexuality in these films. And I think I'll also bring in Dispatch here in a way. Do you see that, that those years sort of somewhere influenced you? You also co-wrote Love, Sex and Dhokha, and, and assisted him on Oye Lucky Lucky Oye.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was fresh out of film school graduate back in Oye Lucky. I was, I think, 2007 now. Yeah, I was this gung-ho kid straight out of film school, and I was fortunate enough to be exposed to a little bit of film even before that, because I had been assisting my parents. My dad was a director, mom was a writer. They were both actors. So I'd kind of grown up in the atmosphere. However, the way I had seen them work was very chaotic. And, the sets were often charged with a lot of, one can even say, uncontrolled anger sometimes. I think the first thing that really I was taken aback when I started working with Dibakar was the sheer calm that he used to work with. So my first lesson as a filmmaker was, you can shoot like this too. You don't need to lose control. You don't need to, be angry at people. In fact, your productivity actually increases if you're calm.
Even though you have like a vocabulary of your own now, an idiom of your own, a style of your own, but I brought that in because, one can relate to, and one can see the sort of continuity and also the continuum that you have been working on as a filmmaker, as an artist. Let me also talk a little bit about, the documentaries, and you mentioned that beautiful quote about, documentaries and fiction. And what has your experience been? Because, there is an element of documentary to both Titli and more perhaps to Agra than in Titli. But if you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I think that, I think, so I was lucky enough to dabble in a little bit of documentary right at the beginning of my career. And actually, I think that became my, one of the first real big hard slaps on my face that I got as a filmmaker, because pre-film school, as I said, I mentioned a little bit that, I was kind of growing up within the atmosphere. I had both my parents were also filmmakers, and so I had gotten a bit of a start there. And I think by the time I was turning 19, 20, I had more or less decided that I wanted to be a filmmaker.
This was after you moved to Delhi from Patiala.
Yeah. That was a while back. I moved to Delhi when I was still a kid, 12, 13. But by the time,
year 1990, I believe.
Yeah, around that 89, 90, 91, around that time.
Group in a way that, that you would want to be a filmmaker who tells stories of urban Indians negotiating with the ways to survive, and there's anxieties, yearnings, aspirations.
Not at all. Okay. I mean, my only attempt is to do as human a piece as possible, with nuance, with everybody's realities and everybody's compulsions weighed in, and not just be a one-dimensional piece. That's my only preoccupation whenever I'm trying to do anything.
While, on the one hand, the picture looks very bright when we talk about filmmakers and films of this kind, of the kind that you make. And on the other hand, there's this real struggle for these films to be released in theaters, that independent filmmakers often have to go through a lot to sort of, because theaters somewhere are not willing to release. How do you look at that sort of dilemma as a filmmaker, and what has been your experience like?
we need a sustainable ecosystem for independent cinema in India. And it's really important because we have the human resource, the people, the artistic sort of impulse within our diverse society to be able to nurture and bring to life all of those interesting, enthralling stories. But without the system, there is a fear of it becoming too hard, and I hope it doesn't, but maybe, dying out even.
Right.
So I think there is a very urgent need for a sustainable ecosystem for a certain kind of film.